Mhm. Is that?
Good afternoon. I'm Teresa O'Neill, Vice President of Global Strategic Partnerships for Travel Oregon, and your moderator for today's webinar. First, welcome, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. We hope this will be an informative and productive session for all of you. COVID-19 has impacted the tourism industry globally, and we believe the insights we share today will help guide and inform your decisions and messaging moving forward. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping notes. We will have a Q&A session. You can submit questions by clicking on the Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen. I would like to share with you all that you are muted as we have several hundred participants. We will answer your questions at the end of the presentation. We will also be emailing out the presentation to everyone who registered. The presentation will also be available on our industry website. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists for today. Todd Davidson, CEO of Travel Oregon, will speak first, followed by Jason Brandt, President and CEO of Oregon's Restaurant and Lodging Association. Alana Hughson, Managing Director of Oregon Destination Association, will speak next, and Sarah Morrissey, Public Affairs Manager for Travel Oregon, will finish up the panel. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and hand that over and the presentation to Todd Davidson.
Thank you, Teresa, and thank you to all of you for taking time to join us today for the State of the Industry webinar. We all know how difficult these times are. I mean, public health crisis aside, we're juggling new work, we're juggling family schedules while we're staying home to help save lives. Every hour counts, and I'm honored that you've chosen to spend this hour with us today. I want to especially thank Teresa and her team at Travel Oregon for organizing today's webinar, and let you know how honored I am to be serving on this panel with Alana and Jason and Sarah as we move forward together as a travel and tourism industry here in Oregon to address the impacts and the steps taken to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. During this webinar, I'll share with you tourism's economic outlook at both the national and the state level. I'll also cover a financial overview at Travel Oregon and how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected our operating budget. I'll share Travel Oregon's strategy for recovery and opportunities where you, as our tourism industry partners, can be involved. There are no words that can adequately convey the impact that COVID-19 is having on our state. We've endured a public health and economic challenges in the past, but none of them have impacted every person that lives in Oregon, and none of them has been as sudden and severe as this. The impact that COVID-19 is having on Oregonians is like nothing I've seen in my 30+ years in Oregon's travel and tourism industry. The devastating consequences on lives, health, jobs, and income at times feels just beyond repair. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, Oregon's travel and tourism industry was thriving. In fact, 2019 marked the state's 10th consecutive year of growth in travel-related spending and visitation. Total travel spending in 2019 reached $12.8 billion, a 3.6% increase over 2018. The industry added 2,000 new jobs in 2019 and now employs 117,500 Oregonians in 2019. And employee earnings were $3.8 billion, a 6% increase over 2018. But COVID-19 has effectively crumbled our industry. Yet these numbers tell us how integral the travel and tourism industry is to the state's economy and how crucial the industry is going to be in the state's economic recovery. Oregon's travel and tourism industry is not the only one that's impacted in facing this economic crisis. This is a global pandemic. It doesn't discriminate, and its effects are felt worldwide. The research firm Tourism Economics releases a week-by-week outlook on travel spending in the United States. Their research estimates a $1.2 trillion total economic loss, including direct travel spending, earnings, and tax revenue. A nationwide loss of $519 billion in direct travel spending, 8 million total jobs lost, 6.9 million of those are direct travel jobs. The travel industry losses alone, as estimated by Tourism Economics, could be enough to send the US into a recession. And the losses are projected to spike in April and May, affecting 89% of all travel employment by the end of the month of May. At the state level, weekly data from the research firm Smith Travel Research shows us that Oregon's hotel industry has reported significant year-over-year declines in all 3 key performance indicator metrics across the state, starting the second week of March. Compared to the same time last year, for the week ending April 18th, statewide hotel occupancy was 23.7%, a nearly 63% decline. Average daily rates were down 32.5%, and the revenue per available room was down 74.9% to $18.37 per room. Now this graph compares 2019 to 2020 and shows the change in weekly occupancy. It clearly demonstrates the lodging occupancy decline starting in mid-March. It is important for me to note that the slight increase in weekly occupancy for the week of April 18th is due to essential workers staying at lodging properties, and it's not a sign of a recovery. The Port of Portland has reported to us and to others that the daily number of passengers going through PDX is down over 95%. And a forward-looking analysis by Adara, based on the number of searches for hotels and flights, forecasts that the intent to travel to Oregon from both domestic and international markets is on a steady decline through September. Now, as many of you on this webinar know, Travel Oregon is almost entirely funded through the state's lodging tax. So in the same way a decline in travel spending impacts the budgets of our colleagues at the local and regional destination marketing organizations, when travel and lodging spending is down statewide, so are Travel Oregon's revenues. This massive drop-off in tourism and hotel revenue has severely impacted our agency budget. Travel Oregon anticipates seeing a $5 million decrease in statewide transient lodging tax coming in to Travel Oregon in this current quarter. This is more than a 50% decline from the $8 million originally forecasted for this quarter. 30% of these dollars, roughly $1 million, are statutorily committed to the competitive grant program and the regional cooperative tourism program. Our current projections, which are based on the statewide transient lodging tax reducing to 1.5% on July 1st, estimate at least a 40% decline in our revenue for the next fiscal year. However, if trends in key economic drivers continue, the decrease could exceed 50%. Before COVID-19, and at a 1.5% tax rate, Travel Oregon's budget was forecasted to be approximately $37 million a year for fiscal year 2020-2021. A 40% decrease will amount to a $16.6 million reduction. So our current projections for fiscal year 2021 are $20.3 million. Keep in mind that statutory requirements would dedicate $4 million of this to the Regional Cooperative Tourism Program and $2 million to our competitive grant program. The balance remaining then for Travel Oregon's core programming and operations is $14.2 million. As an agency, we began to manage this decline immediately while preserving essential programs necessary to support our industry partners in rebuilding our economy and minimizing impacts to employment. However, we're unable to continue operating at current levels and have implemented the following changes that are going into effect June 1st. We have laid off or furloughed 30% of our staff. We're reducing all other full-time salaries. We've canceled or reduced most of our contracts, and we're permanently closing our Salem office. These are the hardest decisions that I've ever had to make in my career. I respect and admire every member of the Travel Oregon team, and my decision to reduce salaries and staff is only a reflection of this economic reality and is no way related to the service and dedication of any of these employees. As bleak as the current financial outlook is, we know that tourism supports state and local economies and is going to be a vital part of Oregon's economic recovery. We are evolving our agency strategic plan to run parallel to the governor's phased reopening plan and focused on the travel and tourism industry with a crisis, recovery, and rebuilding phase. We're obviously still in that crisis phase right now, and we've been working to share as much information and as many resources externally as possible. Before we can begin tourism marketing on any kind of a large scale, we must meet public health standards, and multiple emergency declarations and travel restrictions must be lifted. The governor's reopening plan may also prescribe physical distancing requirements that we'll all need to comply with, as well as mileage guidelines around non-essential travel. However, today I can share with you some of the work that we will be focused on in the recovery and rebuilding phases of our work. As it relates to our grant program, Travel Oregon staff are working on adjusting the grant program guidelines to more effectively and directly meet the needs of industry partners across the state. These new guidelines will be released in May and will most likely focus on supporting our DMO partners, nonprofits, tribes, small hotels, and tour guides and operators in more rural communities with a focus on stimulating demand for overnight travel. For the Regional Cooperative Tourism Program, our Regional Cooperative Tourism Program staff, in partnership with our regional destination management organization partners, are working on refocusing operating guidelines to address emergency management scenarios and to be responsive to our industry's current needs. In May, We'll provide new options on our menu of investment opportunities that focus on COVID-19 related economic recovery. In the area of marketing, Travel Oregon is currently assessing how our marketing can be most impactful coming into this recovery, aiming to drive demand for travel across the state as soon as it's appropriate to do so. Our strategy for this recovery campaign is based on our shared experience that in times of crisis, people come together, and that as Oregonians, we have this strong desire to lift one another up. Right now, this may mean helping each other get essential things we need just to survive and thrive. But in the coming months, it might mean helping communities, helping them rebuild what they've lost by being even more intentional about who we spend our money with and where we travel. We plan for this to be a phased campaign that allows us to speak to audiences as government regulations are lifted and consumer mindsets transition from fear and frustration to hope and exploration. Related to this webinar today, we envision expanding a series of educational webinars, and we're developing an educational webinar series in partnership with our key state, regional, and local partners to be able to source business development and engagement opportunities. Please look for more information on this upcoming webinar series in our industry e-newsletter. Our agency realignment is strategically focusing on how we support, grow the thoughtful reopening of Oregon's tourism industry. We will do our part to help our local communities through the economic rebuilding process, and we're going to work with you, our tourism industry partners, to leverage programs and resources as we move forward together. Thank you. It's now my pleasure to turn this over to Jason Brandt, the President and CEO of the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association. Jason?
Thank you, Todd, and thank you all for joining us today for this webinar. It's an absolute pleasure to be joining you for the Travel Oregon segment today. Today I'm going to be discussing a number of things, but I want to make sure the comments are pointed and helpful to all of you who are taking your valuable time to join us today. There's some important statistics to share on the restaurant and lodging fronts relating to our own economic impact in each of those verticals. I want to make sure everyone on the call knows about our ongoing comprehensive statewide relief efforts and give you the opportunity to figure out how you can plug in to make a difference yourself. And then I want to share a little bit about the latest intelligence, which really is changing in real time relating to what reopening looks like for both restaurant and lodging businesses. Next slide, please. So here's the down and dirty version of what we're dealing with. It's not pretty, similar to what Todd just shared in regards to broader economic data for the tourism industry as a whole. Oregon's restaurant industry has lost 4/5 of its workforce. In normal times, we are the second largest private sector industry in Oregon. About 155,000 Oregonians get their paychecks and their livelihoods through the restaurant industry specifically. And we know that over 120,000 have either been laid off or furloughed, which equates to about 81%. Absolutely devastating. And our work continues in partnership with state agencies to make sure that those workers that you've had to either lay off or furlough have the benefits coming to them from Oregon's employment department. So we continue to work on the importance of streamlining that system and making sure people get the benefits they need in their time of need. On the hotel side, 70%, roughly speaking, in Oregon have either been furloughed or laid off. That equates to about 8 of 10 hotel rooms across the nation. And our numbers here in Oregon are fairly similar as well. Obviously very devastating impacts, but there is light at the end of the tunnel, and we want to talk about what we can do together to stay tough and also persevere and stay positive in moving forward towards the next iteration of what we need to do together to make sure Oregon's hospitality industry opens up in the right way and in a safe way for both employees and for guests. Next slide. So our comprehensive relief efforts can be found on our website. So I wanted to make sure to provide that link, OregonRLA.org/hospitality action. Some of the components of our relief package are referenced on the slide. You'll see we have had some success with the governor's office on issues including commercial rent relief over a 90-day period starting April 1st. There have been some concessions in terms of when you have to make your payments for the corporate activity tax. We're sending out an alert today regarding that. It may apply to you. There is some money that's being freed up through emergency sources for a hospitality grant program. It's a broader small business grant program of $10 million. And we're hopeful that that amount of money can grow in support of the industry in their time of need. Of course, the state, unlike the federal government, is required to balance their budget. So we're doing everything we can to work with our state partners to access relief funds at the state level. So if you have the opportunity, please visit that site and add your company name to our ongoing relief efforts as we prepare for what we expect to be a special session after the release of the May 20th revenue forecast for the state of Oregon. And lastly, I just want to make sure to reference the reopening and make sure everyone knows that I'm always available to reach out to, as well as our staff at Orla, as this intelligence does change in real time. The reopening looks different for restaurants and lodging operations. I'll start with restaurants. We really are focused in on making sure that dining rooms, bars, taverns, tasting rooms, both from breweries and wineries, are all treated the same way if they can open with the same guidelines during a phase one approach to opening Oregon's economy. We think it's very important to make sure we avoid having winners and losers within the industry. And if there's a general ability to make sure that both our employees and our guests are safe, then we would love to make sure that all business models within the hospitality industry, whenever possible, have the same opportunity to open up if they can adhere to those guidelines. Some of these guidelines here were in the first iteration of our restaurant food service subcommittee group, so you can review those. We actually have updated information as of today that we are reviewing in real time. Many of these components still represent the infrastructure or the baseline approach from the governor's office. And rest assured that restaurant operators with vast experience both opening and closing restaurants are actively involved in this process in partnership with the governor's office. The last thing I'll mention is on the lodging side, many of you are very interested in learning more about when non-essential travel will open up. And although we do not have a date yet for when that will happen, we do know that the latest intelligence suggests that non-essential travel may open up as a part of a phase 2 plan, while again, the dining rooms, taverns, and tasting rooms and bars have a fighting chance to open up in phase 1. And again, we just look forward to continuing our working relationship with all of you and want to make sure we're as available to you as we can be as in your moment of need, and look forward to hanging tough and staying strong to protect your interests as we move forward. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce the Managing Director of the Oregon Destination Association, Alana Hughson.
Thank you, Jason, and thanks so much to Travel Oregon and ORLA for your leadership and collaboration with ODA during this extremely difficult time. Some of you may not know that ODA is the nonprofit association of Oregon's Destination Marketing and Management Organizations, DMMOs to abbreviate that. DMMOs are the local, regional, and statewide visitor associations, tourism departments, chambers of commerce, providing tourism promotion, destination management, and grassroots business support in Oregon's destination communities. ODA is governed by an elected board of directors, and I'm happy to share with you today that Megan Conway, the Chief Strategy Officer for Travel Portland, is our president-elect for the fiscal year beginning July 1. ODA members represent a diverse composition of Oregon's nearly 100 DMMOs. Some of these are single staff operations with program budgets under $100,000. Some of our members are nationally recognized organizations with budgets in the tens of millions. And sadly, as we know, COVID-19 leaves none of these organizations unscathed. Because DMMOs are primarily funded by a local share of the transient lodging tax, dedicated by state statute to tourism promotion, the local revenue decline is then the local revenue has been declining. Therefore, there's also a decline in the money available to DMMOs for leveraged and reinvested programs that are designed to complement Travel Oregon's regional and statewide programs. With the lodging industry all but shut down to essential travel, this means the transient lodging tax collections directly supporting our DMMOs have disappeared. DMMOs, being the front line for tourism recovery, are revamping strategic plans to function with a fraction of their pre-pandemic funding. Operations, staff, and programs have been slashed as we face the challenge to reserve funds necessary to ensure that we can message to consumers as soon as travel is deemed safe. We're prepared that the governor's reopening plan may require location-specific messaging and travel restrictions that may be managed at the individual county or regional level. DMMOs are on point to provide a coordinated communications network for their destinations so that the lodging, restaurant, recreation, retail, and tour operator businesses in their communities are able to connect directly with visitors. Every budget mechanism DMMOs have in place is being impacted dramatically by the drop in visitation. This is why ODA opposes any effort that would suspend or reduce the lodging taxes paid by visitors, as this action would effectively put an end to the vital work of DMOs towards statewide tourism recovery. ODA is working to provide our members with timely information around federal and state funding resources, and with our partners at Travel Oregon, ORLA, and US Travel, we have advocated tirelessly to have 501c6 eligibility for key federal and state recovery resources added to the Paycheck Protection Program. While the $484 billion added to the second round of coronavirus funding signed by the president last Friday did not extend PPP eligibility to 501c nonprofits, ODA will continue to advocate for inclusion of nonprofits in future rounds of the CARES Act. We know that discussion about the next round is scheduled to begin in the US Senate on Monday. At this time, DMMOs are eligible for the Coronavirus Economic Impact Disaster Loans, the SBA immediate grants of up to $10,000, community development block grants, and employee retention tax credit and payroll deferral. We've just loaded on our website today the link with SBA that can provide you access to the application forms for each of those programs. And if you've not yet applied, please do so as soon as possible so that your organization is in the queue for the next round of funding. DMMOs can contact ODA as an information resource and will continue to manage our communication system and daily updates. You can access the full US travel deck on specific DMOs CARES Act programs on our website at OregonDestinationAssociation.com. We've also sent out the link through our Facebook and LinkedIn pages, and we'll continue with our quarterly newsletter and priority sensitive callouts. We know this road to recovery is long and challenging and frankly, sometimes really exhausting for all of you, but we are committed to rebuilding Oregon's economy under the umbrella of Travel Oregon and with our partners at ORLA. We can do this, and we know that we can do it together. At this time, it's my privilege to introduce my colleague, Sarah Morrissey, Travel Oregon's Public Affairs Manager. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'd like to spend a few minutes providing you with an overview of Travel Oregon resources and how to stay updated on the recovery work that Todd covered earlier in this presentation. The information that I'll cover can be found on our industry website, which you can access at www.traveloregon.com/industry. To support our partners with up-to-date information, we have created an online toolkit that provides multiple resources from local, regional, state, and national partners. You can access this toolkit from the green banner at the top of the industry website. The information in the toolkit ranges from loan and grant programs for businesses at the federal level to public health information to messaging you can customize for your business or agency. The toolkit also provides a link to a travel data report that Travel Oregon's research team compiles weekly. This report provides updated numbers for many of the sources that Todd spoke about earlier, including STR, Sparkloff social media sentiment findings, and Adara. The toolkit also has a place where you can tell Travel Oregon your story. Share the impacts that you are facing, as well as special promotions or inspirational stories that are happening during this challenging time. To make sure that we are sharing the most up-to-date information with all of you, we are now sending our industry e-newsletter on a weekly basis. This newsletter includes information about grant opportunities and deadlines, provides updates around business relief programs, and other industry-related updates. To sign up for the industry e-newsletter, please visit traveloregon.com/industry and scroll to the bottom of the page to find the sign up link. And finally, I encourage you to connect directly with your Regional Destination Management Organization, or RDMO. If you're unsure of what region you're located in, you can visit our industry website and use your zip code to find your region. Travel Oregon has biweekly calls with our RDMO partners, and they provide us with frequent updates on what is happening within the industry at the local level. Thank you all for your time today, and I'll pass it back to Teresa to wrap up the presentation section of this webinar.
Thank you, Sarah and panelists. I'll just go ahead and start with some of the questions. The first question I'll start with is, will the prior slides be posted to the industry website following this webinar? And again, yes, we absolutely will post that. And I would like to just say that we know some of your colleagues couldn't make this today, so please pass that along as well. The next question that I have will be to Todd. We have an Eastern Oregon Festival in late September. We had been planning to market it as a week's vacation in our area, capped off with our festival. Do you have other suggestions?
You know, while we're currently in the situation of addressing just what crisis and sheltering in place and staying home to save lives feels like, what we don't know is the breadth of the impact. We know the depth of it. We don't know how long this will last. We don't know when we'll start to see the executive orders and other restrictions lifted, social distancing restrictions lifted. And I can only sympathize with how that creates such dramatic challenges for those of you that are trying to plan business operations or do your event planning and carry out your work. I can assure you that our information will be up to date, that I have the pleasure of serving along with Jason Brandt on one of the governor's economic advisory councils related to the economic recovery from coronavirus. And we're working on task forces that are dealing with how the industry can reopen in a responsible manner. And we'll be able to move forward together as an industry as those restrictions are lifted. One of the aspects of that is that many of you may have seen actually, and when the governor rolled out her framework for reopening Oregon's economy, was the idea of phasing it in and the idea that it may be able to be done by county. So that's something to be watching for as well, that this may not be a statewide ban being lifted, but rather that the ban may be able to be lifted by county. That's, again, something we'll need to be able to navigate as the travel and tourism industry, as some counties may open and others may not. But we're involved in that work. We're helping advise the governor on this work as it moves forward. Up until that point, what I would recommend is you get on the Travel Oregon industry website, which is industry.traveloregon.com, so that you're continuously apprised of the work that is happening on your behalf by the team at Travel Oregon. I would also recommend that you connect with your local and regional destination management and marketing organization if you are not already. You have great partners out there in Eastern Oregon for you to be connected to, and their advice and counsel will be invaluable to you as you move forward.
Thank you, Todd. My next question is for Alana. My DMO has been asked to provide an update to our city council and stakeholders on what destinations around Oregon are doing to develop recovery plans. Are you available to join DMOs for virtual meetings with key stakeholders to speak to the broader DMO recovery plan?
Yes, thank you for the question. I have had outreach from DMOs around the state that are working with their stakeholders that have requested that we participate. Right now, of course, all the meetings are virtual, but I am available as a resource and would be happy to do that for any of our DMOs as you're working with and meeting with your local stakeholders. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. The next question is for Jason. I see the list of public health guidance for restaurants, food service, but what about lodging? What best practices should we be putting into place?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for it. For lodging, there is no specific subcommittee within the governor's structure because the governor did not make the decision to close lodging facilities statewide. Now that, of course, runs contradictory to some of the more local jurisdictions that have chosen to create additional guidelines or restrictions, I should say, especially out on the coast and in the gorge, relating to what lodging facilities being open looks like. So regardless of where you are in Oregon, we do know that if you are still open as a lodging property, your traffic is significantly hindered because you are most likely accommodating guests that are essential workers in our state. We do know that, of course, many of our properties are benefiting from the fact that construction did not close in Oregon. It did close in Washington. So there's been some benefits there to keeping some industries moving forward in the current climate. And there has been some occupancy that has recovered because of some of those types of movements out there. For lodging, I would guess you can anticipate something from the governor's office that is more broad for all industry sectors, including lodging, that provides workplace guidelines for how you can open in a safe way for both your employees and your guests. So look for both a document from Orla, specific for lodging operations, that will come into alignment, I would say, with the general workplace guidelines that will be provided by the governor's office as a part of the phased-in reopening of the economy.
The next question is for Todd. Todd, you've served on numerous boards and commissions that influence the health of the tourism industry in Oregon and the U.S., including as national chair of the U.S. Travel Association. Will those connections, and as a part of the influential network, can you bring forward the issue of tribal tourism and the need for recovery and relief funding for the state's most vulnerable communities who have been hit especially hard?
Yeah, especially the part about the tribal communities that are being impacted especially hard. It is one of the reasons why the team at Travel Oregon under Teresa's leadership are making sure that as we look at the guidelines for our grant program and revisions to that we are emphasizing that part of that eligibility is for tribal organizations because of the importance there, the product that is offered there, that cultural experience that is afforded there, but also the suffering that is occurring there economically. And so we want to obviously, as Travel Oregon, be in a position to help address that. At the national level, we are in regular communication with the U.S. Travel Association, the U.S. Travel and Tourism Advisory Board, the National Council of State Travel Directors, and then we're also involved with our coalition of states here in the West, the Western States Tourism Policy Council. And each of those relationships affords us an opportunity to help influence the direction of Congress and things that are going to be included in subsequent iterations of the CARES Act. I know I was, as we look to how Oregon reopens its economy, I was pleased to see our governor enter into a coalition with the governors in Washington and California, which has now been expanded to include the governors in Nevada and Colorado. Obviously, these are important markets for Oregon, and if that curtain of restrictions begins to lift together, these are obviously going to be good feeder markets for us as we look to subsequent recovery and rebuilding of the travel and tourism industry over the next 12 to 24 months.
The next question is for Alana. The ODA annual conference is scheduled to take place in January, right after MLK weekend. As the CDC has said right now, it is likely the coronavirus will return this fall, winter, and be a double whammy along with the annual flu. Is ODA planning to move its annual conference to a different time of year to avoid this potential conflict?
At this time, the conference dates, we're still holding those dates and would love to be able to move forward. The goal in part was to hold the conference the same dates year over year for consistency purposes. And we also had scheduled the conference to collaborate with other industry conferences, both within Oregon and nationally. So right now those dates stand. It's absolutely on our radar that this could be a major issue for us as far as moving forward in January. So I'd like to ask everyone presently to hold those dates and then stay tuned for additional information. Things are moving so quickly in regard to testing and potential vaccines that in large part, any large gathering groups are going to be based upon what comes forward as far as protecting people from the virus in the future. But we will keep everyone apprised and definitely plan to continue the conference, even if we need to shift the dates temporarily.
Thank you. Jason, a similar question for you. Has the Oregon Tourism Leadership Academy program been canceled for 2020?
No, the answer, not yet. We're watching it in real time, as I know many of us are, relating to the events that we're all trying to figure out in our minds. Originally, the plan for the Tourism Academy was to start this week in cooperation with the Rural Tourism Conference in Central Oregon. Of course, we have delayed the first seasonal gathering of the Tourism Academy and still are holding the dates for July for the summer gathering, as well as the fall gathering in October for Southern Oregon, and also the gathering on the North Coast in December. It is possible we will have to further delay the Academy, and we'll be looking to those that are actively involved as participants that have already set aside valuable time on their calendars as to what they're able to do. For example, if we find that the summer gathering in the Mid-Willamette Valley is not possible, then maybe we will look to start the program in the fall and then have that carry through the summer of 2021. The reality for the Tourism Academy is that I think we have the ability to pick up the Academy and start it from a seasonal standpoint when we know it's safe to do so for the participants as well as the speakers we will have involved in the program.
Thank you. This question is for Todd, and Alana may want to also chime in. Is there any effort or advocacy plan regarding local capacity for DMOs, chambers, and Main Street programs that will likely be critical partners in recovering efforts at the local level while facing decimated budgets as primary funding sources? Business memberships, TLT, and event revenue have all been decimated. Question.
Do you want me to jump in, Todd?
Sure, Alana, please go ahead and go first.
Okay, at this point, we're referencing the DMOs access the programs that have been approved and funded. And I briefly mentioned those earlier, and they're listed on the slides that will go out in the deck, being the EIDL loans, the SBA immediate grants of $10,000, the community development block grants, and those are subject to local discretion, and then the employee retention tax credit and payroll tax deferral. So while those are an application process for the federal funds, we will certainly stay tuned as we move forward and hear from the governor later this month with the Oregon revenue forecasts if there will be any statewide funding that may be applicable to DMOs and communities in crisis. So we will be providing communication on that. And I know that Travel Oregon is on top of this issue, and Sarah shared the comprehensive links that are available through the Travel Oregon website. All of these resources will be updated in real time as new information and potential new funding sources open up.
The only other piece I would add to that, and thank you, Alana, I wanted to defer to you because you'd covered a lot of the work that was happening at the national level regarding the CARES Act and those elements that would be available to especially the organizations that were listed, like Main Street programs and DMOs and chambers of commerce and others that are 501c6s that were not captured in the initial iterations of the CARES Act. That's important work, and it's work that is continuing. Travel Oregon's involved in that work. ODA is involved in that work. Orla is involved in that work. These are important aspects of the travel and tourism industry that need to be taken into consideration. At the Travel Oregon level, we are also looking at, as I had referenced earlier, how to modify our grant program and our regional cooperative tourism program to afford more flexibility to our RDMO partners so that they can adapt to this crisis. And in moving that industry forward, we're also looking at modifying our grant program, which was at once envisioned to be what we call our medium grant program, so there would have been fewer larger grants, to now doing something that's more akin to our small grant program, so that we're able to touch, support, and assist more businesses, more organizations, more opportunities throughout the state with resources, as we all move forward and adapt to this new normal.
Thank you. Jason and Todd, this is a question for both of you. Is Travel Oregon or Orla considering creating a unified message from the subcategories in relation to travel, i.e. restaurants, lodging industry, outdoor recreation, to ease travelers' minds that we are working together and acting as one unit with one vision, with unified efforts, something recommended to display on our business websites and marketing?
Do you want me to start, Todd? Happy to.
Sure, Jason.
Okay. So absolutely. I think that there's been a lot of really important conversations happening behind the scenes between the staff at Orla and the staff at Travel Oregon. A lot of the work we do has kind of fallen into two spheres, regardless of whether we're in a pandemic situation or not. Travel Oregon is the statewide marketing and promotional arm, and they do an exceptional job at that work. And Orla really serves as that advocacy arm and representation of the lodging and restaurant operators themselves with elected officials and city and county administrators, as well as government and state agency staff. So the work is more important than ever, I think, in terms of the connectivity. We have big challenges on our doorstep relating to how our fellow Oregonians feel about travel ramping up and when they feel it will be safe to take proactive strategies to embrace tourism, specifically leisure travel once again. So I do want to assure the person asking the question, those that also might be curious about what's being done, that much is being done and a lot still needs to be completed and continue to work through. But I'm confident that we'll be able to find a path forward to make sure that the advocacy work and the intelligence that we're working on in concert with the governor's office, as well as city and county administrators and jurisdictions, is intelligence that's readily available to the Travel Oregon staff so that they know how we can promote, where we can promote, and how we can effectively get that work done in a way that best meets your needs as operators, while still providing that confidence that we're going to absolutely have to make sure that residents in all of Oregon's communities have when leisure travel starts up again.
I will just add by beginning and echoing Jason's sentiment that a unified message is paramount. I mean, Travel Oregon, we see ourselves as promoting the entirety of the travel and tourism industry statewide. That is, you know, our mission, to drive demand for the travel and tourism industry and for visitation throughout the state. What I would also add to that, though, is that even within those particular segments, we are also looking at those holistically as well. For example, within the outdoor recreation space, we're working with the Oregon Office of Outdoor Recreation, the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department, on messaging around outdoor recreation specifically. And we're doing this in partnership with the other public land managers like the U.S. Forest Service, the BLM, National Park Service, and others. So even within the verticals, we want to make sure that we're being comprehensive and holistic as we move forward, and make sure that we're all singing from the same song sheet as we move forward with these messages, encouraging people to travel.
Alana, the next question is for you. We are a DMO funded solely by lodging taxes. At the same time, we are facing extreme budget reductions, and we are also struggling with our city leadership, wanting to take larger percentage of our funds to fill empty coffers. We feel that the tourism marketing, when it is safe to travel, is the strongest and most appropriate use of limited lodging tax funds to benefit businesses in our community. How do we best educate leaders that this is the strongest path forward for recovery?
Excellent question. And we're hearing that from DMOs across the state. And I know that Jason and Todd can weigh in on this as well. ODA has taken a very firm position that we will continue to support and uphold the state statute that mandates a certain percentage of lodging tax be dedicated to tourism related promotion and facilities. It's going to be important as an education process when we're appearing before elected officials to continue to demonstrate the types of programs that DMOs are executing from the grassroots level that are going to help their destinations recover. And I am available to be a support resource, whether that's appearing through an in-person webinar or conference call, or with letters of support from ODA, outlining the importance of individual communities, the programs that they have launched in order to position their destinations effectively, providing a return on investment and supporting local businesses, and helping to convey how imperative it is that because DMOs are going to be on the front line for this recovery for individual communities, that their funding must stay intact and as whole as possible.
Thank you. Will the World Games still be held in Eugene in 2021? Todd, I'll ask you to answer that question.
Well, the short answer is no. And the reason it's no is because the Olympics have been moved, still in Tokyo, but they have been moved from this year, from 2020 to 2021. And as a result of that, the World Athletics, which oversees the World Athletics Championships, what was formerly known as the World Track and Field Championships, they needed to seek other dates. And they have been offered the opportunity to hold their event in 2022. So the Oregon 21 is now Oregon 22 and is moving forward accordingly. Still planning for same event, same scale, just 1 year later, in order to accommodate the moving of the Olympics from 2020 to 2021.
Thank you. As a tour operator, do you see tour retail per capita sightseeing operations restarting in phase 1, 2, or 3? Todd, I'll ask you to answer that as well.
That is a great question. Based on the initial iterations of the phases, it appears as though it would be in the latter phases that the openings of businesses may occur. What you will see is how those modifications are going to be made based on adjustments that individual businesses can make. So in other words, there will be standards that are going to be defined in order for businesses to open. So if you're a tour operator, for example, what can you do to maintain a certain level of social distancing? What can you do to accommodate what may be a limitation on how far you are permitted to travel under the guise of what is defined as essential or non-essential travel? So all these things will need to be taken into account as you move forward. But based on my understanding of the phases at this time and the things that would need to occur as those phases are implemented, it would be in the latter 2 phases, either phase 2 or phase 3.
Jason, the next question is for you. In the event the governor makes a declaration to open restaurants and lodging, is there a plan in place to put pressure on local governments to open in accordance with the governor's plan for those of us with local governance that may not be welcoming to tourism and travel?
The short answer is yes. Actually did have a conversation earlier today with potentially one of the jurisdictions that's being referenced in that question. This is one of the jurisdictions that has taken additional action on top of the governor's directive. And I do believe that with effective mobilization of our industry, both restaurants and lodging, especially in on the Oregon coast, where there's been a disproportionate, I would say, negative impact based on the directives and then the additional steps that have been taken to try to close down tourism, if you will. There will certainly be a need to make sure that our voices are loud, but also clear in advocating for alignment and consistency in what our reopening plan looks like. The last thing we need are checkerboard approaches across the state that provide more confusion than clarity. So we have a lot of work to do on that front based on what has developed for our industry along the coast as well as elsewhere. And you have our commitment to try to advocate for as much alignment as possible in those future decisions. And I do have hope that we're going to get there based on the conversation today.
Question for Todd. Can you please elaborate on Travel Oregon's marketing plans with focus on driving demand across the state?
You bet. And I will do it with the caveat that I was reviewing briefs with our global marketing team on this campaign, last week. So this is still very much a plan in development. It's going to be tied to the various phases of reopening. You can appreciate the complexity of the reopening, as I mentioned, that it may not occur statewide. It may occur county by county. It may occur business sector by business sector or industry sector or segment by segment. And these are all things that we'll need to take into account as we roll out our marketing campaign and how we might use social versus paid media and other sources to get the message out about what's open, where you can go, et cetera. In the meantime, obviously, we have focused on continuing to do a couple of things through the social media channels that we're still fully operational on. One is making sure we're getting the word out about folks being safe. Their health, their lives, their safety is paramount to us. And so we want to make sure that we're getting the communications out about things that they can do to help stay home and to save lives. At the same time, we want to make sure we're inspiring them to travel in Oregon so that when the time is right, to let them know that Oregon's travel and tourism industry is going to be here. We're going to be ready to serve them, and we're going to be eager to welcome them into our businesses, into our communities, and obviously back into our state. A couple of things that we're looking at, when I look at how the tourism industry in Oregon recovered following 9/11, as well as how we operated during the Great Recession of 2008 and 9, we realized that, for example, after 9/11, one of the things that needed to occur was folks just needed to know that it was okay to travel again. It felt almost like you were affording them permission to stop, waiting for what might be the next event. I mean, nothing that tragic and cataclysmic had occurred in the U.S. and folks were, in some instances, the sense was they were kind of glued to their TVs. Some were calling it the CNN effect, and kind of waiting for that next event to occur and fearful that it would. And our campaign focused on Oregonians. Our campaign focused on letting Oregonians know that this is a great time to get out and experience their own state, to reconnect with their family, to reconnect with their friends, to reconnect with themselves. And we did this in partnership with our travel and tourism industry across the state. We ran a series of consumer activations, really as specials, as deals, where we had hoteliers and DMOs and others that were providing packages that could be considered by visitors as an incentive for them to use as they got out and experienced the state, which was not unlike what we did during the Great Recession, which also happened to coincide with Oregon's sesquicentennial. And so the team at Travel Oregon launched the I Am Oregonian campaign and encouraged Oregonians to get out and experience their own state, hit certain destinations throughout the state, attractions and et cetera. And in doing so, they could collect badges and bragging rights. And we were encouraging them to obviously get out and experience the entire state. So there's going to be an opportunity for us to reach out to Oregonians, I think, first, and encourage them that during this time is a great time for them to, again, to reconnect with their family, to reconnect with their friends, to reconnect with themselves, and to do something that's going to be to the betterment of their fellow Oregonians, to get out and support Oregonians in communities across the state that have struggled during the COVID-19 pandemic, to help them get their feet back under them again, get out, encourage that economic impact in these businesses and communities throughout the state, to look at doing that through a variety of different media channels and in concert with our local and regional DMO partners, as well as the businesses that comprise their memberships and are the backbone of the travel and tourism industry.
Thank you. Alana, I'll ask the last question of you. Does ODA have any sample templates of COVID recovery plans for DMOs that you can share to help us build our recovery plan?
Yes, thanks for the question. We have received some template recovery plans from a few of our DMOs, and we'll put out a call out to see if any others have those that they're willing to share. But we have some really remarkable plans from some brilliant DMOs, and they have provided their approval to share those and offer other DMOs to use them as templates if they so choose. So yes, please reach out to me if you're looking to build a presentation or a structure for your recovery plan and you want to see what your fellow DMMOs around the state are doing. I'm happy to share those plans, and we'll get them to you right away.
Thank you all. I do want to mention that Travel Oregon will be answering the questions that we couldn't get to today in this webinar, and we'll email those answers to all registrants. I also want to remind everyone that we're going to have the deck and the recording of the webinar, and we will share that out. And with that, we would like to thank everyone on the call today, and we wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you.